Hello and welcome to the Tech Talk. Today we're going to go through how to set up an 8.6 or 8.9 Series NVR and show you the standard procedures of setting it up correctly and what to do to make sure it's correctly recording and optimized for general purpose use. This is just a general guide, so please make sure you check everything yourself, and for your scene, every setup is different, so we're not telling you that this is the only way to do it. It's just a good guide on general good practice. So first of all, we're just gonna go into the setup. As you can see, we've actually disabled the password here. The reason for that is just to make it easy to go in and out of the menu, to show you how to use this system. And also we do recommend you disable this when you're setting up a recorder, just to make it easier for you and your setup process. So first of all, as you can see here, we've got a lot of these settings already set up, but we'll just go through them one by one. Here you can see we're in Australia, in Sydney, so we've set it to the time zone of Sydney. Language English, your date format, make sure it's day, month, year, the system date, of course, and here you can see we've got menu output set to auto. What this means is basically it will, if you've got it connected up to HDMI and you turn the recorder on, it will automatically go to HDMI for your menu output. This 8.6 or 8.9 series, depending on which one you've got, with the 8.6 series that we're on, it will basically allow you to program the VGA separate to the HDMI, and as well as your CVBS, which is a BNC output. So you can manually program each output. I do recommend changing this to HDMI if you've got HDMI connected for your main output. Reason being, if there is a power failure, and if you do have VGA connected as well, sometimes the recorder will go to the VGA and then your main monitor will go to the VGA. So then you'll get a blank screen if this does happen, and you'll be getting a telephone call from your customer pretty quickly saying, why can't I use the recorder? And this is usually the case. To fix that problem, you need to log in through the web browser and change it through the web browser via a laptop or a computer. Next, you can see here on the 8.6 series, you can manually program the VGA and the HDMI resolution. At the moment, we've got it set to a low res for the VGA. We're not using the VGA at the moment. And we've got it set to 1920 by 1080 on the HDMI. So depending on your screen, if you've got a 4K monitor, you can go all the way up to 8K on this recorder. This is the N series. Obviously, the more you use, the more it's going to take up on the recorder's memory. We generally set them at 1080p because it's a good balance, and realistically what it's set to is not what it's going to record at, it's just what you can see. But if you do have a big screen TV, you can go all the way up to 8K if you want to get the best quality. Make sure your output standard is set to PAL, and down further we've got enable DST. So if you're in New South Wales and you need to set your DST, you need to set it like this. You need to have October 1st Sunday 2, April 1st Sunday 3, and 60 minutes DST bias. If you're in Queensland, you can change that. You don't need DST, but just check your requirements, because these are these NVRs are USA spec. By default, they're in the Northern Territory, so we need to change this in each recorder to make sure it's correct. Otherwise, you'll get a wrong time change when daylight savings kicks in. So yes, the next thing we need to show you is how to set up your motion detection. So if you've got cameras connected, which I'll show you in this screen here, so when you have all your cameras connected, if they're by plug and play, you should get this little blue icon pop up. If that comes up like an asterisk, you can click on the asterisk and it will tell you if it's a password problem, if you've connected them manually, or a cable issue, then you need to check your cable. When it does show up blue, you'll notice you've got an upgrade option if you need to do a firmware upgrade on the camera. The IP addresses will change. It'll tell you the camera name, the protocol, the model number, and down the bottom here you can scroll across. You can get the serial number, the firmware build. So basically you can expand these to see more information like that. Right, so if you do call up our support, we're most likely going to ask you for the serial number or the firmware number. So make sure you take a photo of that and send it to us, or basically write it down and SMS it to us, or however you communicate. Down the bottom here you'll see another option here of number of unadded. So if you've got this connected to a switch that's on a LAN and the recorder's on a LAN, you can add cameras manually through here. So if you've added them to a switch, these will come up if they're not activated as inactive. You can then click on them and you can activate those by putting a IP address and a password into them. Once you give them the correct IP address, you can then edit. See that little edit button there? You can click on him again, and then you can change it to manual, put in its address as long as it's the right address, put in the password, and press OK. If you're using another manufacturer's camera and it's activated, or if it's a different brand, we've got a whole bunch of different supported brands. If it's OnViv, you select OnViv. Make sure you put in the OnViv password. So that's basically a quick rundown guide on how to do that. Now, once this is all online, we need to make sure that we'll go back to this section here under the cog. I call it the cog or the gear. Go to event. We'll just select our panorama camera and make sure you've got enabled. So this is motion detection. You need to make sure it's enabled. Now, if you default the camera for any reason, usually it disables motion. So you need to make sure you re-enable motion and that you reset up the camera so it's also recording. This is very important because if you don't have this set up, it's not going to record when motion occurs. Now, see, this is camera 6. So trigger channel D6, that means that it's going to trigger D6 to record when it detects motion. So usually this is already ticked. You don't need to worry about this, but just keep it in mind. By default, this should all be blue. Don't need to change anything there. And here you can see there's a #1 hashtag. That's your motion detection area, so we can clear that. We've got human and vehicle ticked, and the sensitivity is roughly around 60, which is fine, that's default. Now, if I just want to have a certain area that needs to trigger motion, you just draw the box. This can be a little bit tricky sometimes because if you don't draw it correctly, it will tell you that you're overlapping and you haven't done it properly. I suck at doing this. There we go. And then you left click, and then right click. Then you've got an area. Stop drawing, apply. So now, if anything moves in this area that I've drawn, inside that area, then it will start recording. You'll see a little man move, the little yellow man, and the record symbol. If you get the little yellow man, but not the record symbol, it means it's not recording. You need to check some other settings, but we'll get to that shortly. So we're just going to clear this. I'm going to put the whole area in because I want it to record everything. Hopefully I can do this correctly. Yep. Okay, now I've got human and vehicle ticked with this camera. It does support human and vehicle recording, so it can give you classifications in your playback, which is a really nice feature to find things quickly. This camera also does support flashing light alarm and audio alarm output, so you can program it to do like a warning light and a warning sound via this menu. There's more options in the camera, so you can log into the camera You can program it to only go off at once or twice or 3 times or how many times you want it. If you really want to be annoying, you can keep on doing it, but we don't suggest it goes on too far. And if you're in a residential area, be considerate of your neighbors. So under your motion area, that is now done, so we've enabled that. The next sort of step that we need to show you is also setting up your video parameters. So to go to your video parameters, I'm going to go to camera and video parameters. So we'll set, let's just go on over this one. This is an 8 megapixel camera. So this is the resolution that it's set to. This specific camera does have a microphone built in. If you want to utilize the microphone, you need to select video and audio. If video is only selected, that means that it will not allow you to use the microphone. Be mindful if you do select video and audio and you record audio, you need to check with your local laws and regulations to make sure, because in a lot of jurisdictions it's illegal to record audio. When in some recorders as well, when you select video and audio, you need to make sure you also select it for the event, which is your motion. And we also need to do it for substream. If you don't do it for substream when you're in LTS Connect in the app and you try and bring up the microphone, if you haven't selected HD, then it won't work. It'll give you an error. So you need to make sure if you select standard definition, then video and audio is selected. So that's very important. You need to make sure that's selected. So before we move on, we've got a couple of settings here. Bitrate variable, video quality medium, frame rate 20, and then you've got your maximum bitrate. So different resolutions require different bit rates, and we've got it set to H.265, which compresses the files down more than the previous H.264. Sometimes people don't like using H.265 or H.265 Plus because when you've got fast moving objects such as vehicles, it can create ghosting or video problems. But generally speaking, we do use it quite commonly now, and it's become pretty much industry standard format. So I'm going to put up on the screen a recommended resolution and bitrate chart for different frame rates. I would suggest following this as a guide. You can always change this accordingly, but what you need to make sure you do is you match your frame rate for both your mainstream, which is your normal live view, and your event. Your event is your motion. So these need to be the same. Otherwise, you're going to get a change in frame rate when there's motion. And make sure your bitrate is the same. For 8 megapixel, 6144 is a pretty good bitrate for that frame rate. You can lower this. I have had customers use 4096 and they've had pretty good results. Most of the time it's going to give you a good picture. It's only when you start to digital zoom that you lose some quality, but the best thing is to try it out and see what you're happy with and what works for you. You can use 4096. Perhaps you might want to lower the frame rate a little bit down to 15 and change it to 4096 for both of those. If you've got heaps of hard drive, then you can keep it at that. It's going to chew more of your hard drive up, but if you've got plenty of hard drive, then you don't have to worry. The other thing that you need to check, and this is important for mostly using it on the app, and also if you've got a large screen TV, is your substream. So your substream, basically, it's pretty much only 2 settings here. Other recorders, other cameras vary, so you need to check with whatever camera you're using. If you lower this too much, if your bitrate's too low, you're going to get a really bad picture in multi-screen. So you don't want to have that too low. Around 512 for this camera is good. It's set to H.265 as well, and the iframe interval is set to 50. So you don't need to change that, you can leave that where it is. But most of the time this is when you're in your app. If you've got really bad internet and you want to improve just your live view, then I would suggest changing this to a lower res and change the frame rate. It might help it out a little bit, but that's on the standard definition view, not on the high definition view. that high definition view is your mainstream. Okay, so that's just a basic guide on how to set your resolution for an 8 megapixel camera. This of course changes when you're dealing with like a panorama camera. We've got it set to max frame, and it's actually set to a very low bit rate. So, you want to probably put this up higher for a panorama camera because it's got a very big resolution. So ideally this probably should be at around 6,000 for mainstream, because it's also recording at a high frame rate. Okay, so the other thing that we need to adjust when you're setting up a recorder is your display parameters. Now this is your on-screen display. So your on-screen display is basically what shows the overlay, the date, the time, and the name of the camera. So this can be adjusted here. You can change the camera name to whatever you want. And then after you change it, you can press apply. You can then move that around in case it's in an area you don't want it to be in, where it's blocking the footage. On the bottom left, I've got the date and time. I personally always disable week, and I always change it to day, month, year. That's my personal preference. I don't necessarily like having the week up there because it takes up more room, but it's up to you and what you want. You can also change a whole bunch of settings in your camera here. This is where you can configure your wide dynamic range. If your camera is older, then it might not support this, so you need to check and see what camera you have. But this camera does support it. Now, as you can see, this is a color at night camera, so when it's a color at night camera, I can't turn wide dynamic range on without adjusting the the exposure time. So the exposure time is on 1 on 12. It needs to be higher than 1 on 25 for it to work. And that's because this camera operates in a very low light. It gives you color at night. If I put it on a higher exposure time, it means that it won't get as low light, but it'll be able to do wide dynamic range. There is another way in configuring the camera separately to have a time schedule when you can individually program exactly what settings you want for day and throughout the afternoon and nighttime. And I highly recommend that if you want the best results. That's not something we're going to talk about today. Today we're just going to focus on the main settings, which is your day-night switch. So this is when it changes from day to night. If you've got an infrared camera especially, you don't necessarily need to change these. Usually you get a pretty good result, but this is where you would adjust all these settings if you need to. There's not much you really need to adjust because most of the time these are pretty good. So after you've set that up, the other thing which is very important, and you need to have this set, is the schedule. If you don't have a schedule, then it won't record. So at the moment, we'll just go back to that camera. All cameras should have the schedule enabled, and because we want motion detection, they're all colored in green. If you wanted to do full-time record for one day or for the whole week, you would color them all in blue, just like I've done there. If you want only one day in motion or a certain part of the day, you can also change that so it does continuous and then motion. Typically, most of our solutions are always on motion. Make sure you press apply. Now, back to when we discussed audio before, I mentioned that if you enable audio, that doesn't mean that it's recording. It's only so you can listen in. If you want to change the settings to record, you need to go to this section, advanced, and under each camera, you need to enable audio. After you do this, then it will be recording audio. So please also, again, check with your local laws and regulations, because it's illegal in New South Wales to record audio in commercial precincts without people's knowledge. The pre and post record is also very important. Basically, this is how many seconds before a motion is triggered you want it to record and how many seconds after. So at the moment, by default, it's set to 5 seconds. You can increase this to give you more of a buffer. So here we can see under your storage device, the hard drive status, which is normal, we need to make sure that this is in a good state. Otherwise, the system won't record. And if you don't get a record light on your recorder when there's motion, if you see a little motion man, but you don't see a record light, you need to check your hard drive status under this area, which is under the storage device. So you can see here, if you've got more than one hard drive, there'll be another hard drive in this list, and it will probably be saying sleeping or something like that. That's completely normal. So main things you want to check is if it says abnormal or something under status, then you can try repair the database by clicking here and then clicking repair database. It will take a long time sometimes, so you might want to walk away and get a coffee and come back. If it fails or if there's any other problems, you can do, there is another section where you can go to hard drive operation and you can do more tests. You can tell it to continue to use the disks if there is a problem, but we don't recommend that. Your hard drives are like your wheels on your tire. Once they wear out, you should get them changed. So you can do a long test, expanded test, and if it passes this, then it might be okay. If it doesn't, then you want to consult your security professional or your installer. So one other section which is very important is how to configure your monitor output. So previously we mentioned how your HDMI and VGA works. This is how you program what you see on the screen. So at the moment, we're going to program the HDMI. Now 3x3 means it's 3 splits, so 3 cameras in a row. 3, 3, 3. So there's 9 cameras on the screen. This is an 8 channel, I think. So you can do 4. Oh no, sorry, this is a 16 channel. If we did 1 by 1, it would literally just show one picture, as you can see. We'll go back in there. Live view. If we did 3 by 3, or say 1 by 5, it would show 1 big and 5 small. This is how you can pre-program the live view mode. Your switching is basically how many seconds you want. If you set it to auto switch, it will go through the cameras and how long you want it to go through each camera, how long you want it to stay on each camera for. Now, you can do this for your VGA output, your auxiliary output, which is your BNC output. How you program where you want the cameras is under general, then view. So for HDMI, so this is basically what you want it to display on HDMI. If you're doing a 1 by 5, you can change it to a 9, a 3 by 3, and you can move these cameras around by clicking on the camera and then clicking on the list. So I've just taken channel 1 off and put channel 1 in the middle. I can put number 5 here, D5. So you can reorganize the cameras how you want to see them on the screen. You don't need to change them on the cabling on the back. You can do this for 4 split, however you want to do it. You can clear, if you press this, it gets rid of all of the channels. If you press this, it puts them all back. So you can do custom layouts and name them as well. There's quite a lot of options. Basically, you can individually program your HDMI and your VGA to have different outputs accordingly.